question I think this board needs to answer after we do our homework is, why do we need these different layers of government involved in something that both the county and the city can deal with? I think it would mean a cost savings to the authority, because they would no longer have to pay Mr. Mason. And isn't it about saving money at this time? So I would hope when you give us, when we report back to you, you would take into consideration the layers of government that already exist. Because you have state ordinances, you have county ordinance, and you have city ordinances. And I think the proper thing to do is let the city and the county deal with the type of complaints that are created by the landlords and the tenants.
Thank you. Any other public comment on the Solid Waste Task Force report?
I'd like to make a clarification or make sure that I understand something. As a member of the task force, I don't take orders.
Andy, you want to identify yourself for the clerk, please?
Andy Larson, Delmar County. The task force is appointed and then has its state job to do. It does not answer to any local authority. It does its own as spelled out in the resource code. We would naturally, we're a team, and as I've mentioned to my supervisor, we're doing the homework of the Solid Waste Board. But we do not take direction or get told. I certainly, I'm not trying to be, I just want to make sure this is clear. We don't take direction. We will definitely look at what we need to look at and what seems to be a problem, but the board stands on its own as state mandated and will run its affairs that way. And if I'm wrong, somebody needs to tell me.
I'm going to have to read your bylaws, but I think that you are advisory and that you can do tasks of your choice, but we can ask you to prioritize tasks that we believe are pressing. And it's not adversarial.
No, and I'm not standing here trying to be adversarial. I'm trying to make sure that what I am doing and spending the time to do, if I look into something, if we look into something, naturally we want to work together. What I want to make sure of is that we're not told to go this direction and not look over here. Okay, just point to be clear.
Priority.
Thank you. Any other public comment on the Solid Waste Task Force report? Okay, seeing no other, any other questions or comments from commissioners? Okay, we're going to move on then to the consent agenda. Any public comment on the consent agenda, which includes the approval of the minutes only? I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any comments from members? Rose, would you poll the vote, please?
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Murray?
Yes.
Commissioner Ania?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Chair Hemmingson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the director's report. Kevin?
I've included several reports in your binder, and because of the way that we're delivering things on Thursdays,
And if I was going to say that with the mic on, I would say there are 4 items on this director's report, all financial And I've also included, for your information, the May auditor's report as well. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions from board members?
There's one particular person, I think, that's out of business. I thought we had talked about writing that one off.
On the charges?
Yes.
Yeah, I was looking at those as well, and I'm going to review all those, because I think there were a number of them that we already gave up on and should be removed from that list. To me, it looks like there may be about $5,000 out of $260,000 in charges that we probably won't get, and we've talked about that over a year ago. So we'll take a look at that, and if there's any further action required from the board to remove those, we'll come back next meeting.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, I think didn't we had passed a process in terms of how many days out somebody was late, that they'd get a notice and then a follow-up and go to collection at that point? Is that happening on the one?
Yeah, no, we're Rose actually enjoys collecting from people, so we've got the right person on the job, and we're very aggressive in collecting, and at the point that they stop paying, we stop letting them charge until they pay up, and so all that part's working. But these are the report only reports 90 days out, but some of these charges have been on there for a couple years, and we really don't think we're going to see the money. Catherine's right.
Okay. Any other questions? Rich, Catherine, Martha? Public comment on the director's report? Seeing none, we're going to move on then. No agenda items for the landfill post-closure, and no agenda items for the collections franchise. So a transfer station, discussion possible action regarding review of the policy to accept invasive weeds. Tansy, ragwort.
Yeah,
English ivy,
Ted's given you a written report on this, and I've asked him just to give you an overview, and as you noted earlier, Jim Buckles is here to talk about it.
Go ahead, Ted.
So, briefly, the transfer station has accepted tansy ragwort, which is an invasive noxious weed, particularly for cattle, since the transfer station's been open. That is a continuation of the policy that the board set for the Crescent City landfill. Of course, that's a county-owned landfill, and we received tansy for no charge. In support of County Ordinance 7748, which is a tansy control ordinance that allows the Ag Department to essentially require landowners to remove tansy from their property. And so it's kind of an incentive for property owners to do that, and we've continued that through. Unfortunately, of course, finances are tighter than ever, and so in an effort to try to move towards financial sustainability, of course, we need to reduce the number of free services for which neither the authority or Hambro WSG are getting compensated. So staff recommendation is that effective July 2012, that invasive weeds are to be received and charged and disposed as solid waste, because that is how they're handled. They're received on the tipping floor and they're disposed of as a landfill item. They're not composted or moved into the yard debris program, because those weed seeds can persist, and to the extent that a portion of the yard debris is processed and sold as a dirty fine soil amendment product, neither Hambro WSG nor the people buying that product really want weed seeds to be in there, especially invasive weed seeds. And so, again, the recommendation is that these invasive weeds be received as solid waste, not as yard debris, and that start July 2012, and that we would notify the County Ag Commissioner of this change. Now, I have been in discussion with Ken Smith as well as Mr. Buckles, who's here, and they might want to comment on this issue.
Jim, perfect opportunity for you. No.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
There we go. Oh, good.
Loud and clear.
I noticed the paperwork I saw listed a whole bunch of noxious weeds, and I'm going to stick to tansy because that's the one that concerns us most. I'll let someone else deal with the other scotchbroom and some of the other weeds they were talking about. Background, tansy will kill cattle and horses. I know some ranchers that said they know of cattle that have been killed by eating tansy, and we know of some horses that have been. So it is a problem, and it also can take over fields if you allow it to. Like he said, there is an ordinance, and we feel that there should be if you have an ordinance, you should give them a way to comply with the ordinance. And that's part of the reason why it was brought in the first place. I've got a strong suspicion that if you charge for it, you're not going to get nearly as much tansy, and people won't pull as much because they don't really have a way to get rid of it. If you pick it when it's in bloom and throw it on the ground, there's a chance that those mature plants will produce seeds even when they're pulled. So that's part of the problem with it. What we would like to see is an exemption, at least for tansy. We can deal with the other weeds, but in particular tansy, because of the problem with cattle and horses, and it can take over things, or at least postpone it if possible. Like I said, there is an ordinance, and it is really important to the ranching community, to people with horses. If you have a few acres and have some horses, it can be a problem. And we're afraid of other ways to deal with it because, like you said, we don't want the seeds to spread. If you just pull it when it's in bloom, you take that risk of spreading the seeds everywhere else. And then we get a complaint, we have to come call, and some people say, yeah, we'll do it. Some people don't really want to do it. And it is a problem. It can take over. I'm sure you guys are aware of some of the problems. So we'd just like to strongly recommend that, at least for tansy, that you keep the exemption in place so they have some way to dispose of the tansy that they do pull.
Mr. Chair, have you guys had a lot of conversations between solid waste staff and the ag commissioners, or the ag department? Has there been ongoing conversation about this particular request?
Only in the last few days, and I'll let Ted answer that. Between Ted and Ken, I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been some, but
We've spoken about it, and that's how the additional information about A-rated weeds, including skeleton weed, Dalmatian toadflax, meadow knapweed, diffuse knapweed, square rose knapweed, that's how those came up.
So we know how many pounds were per year that have been taken
Well,
to
for the
transfer
tansy,
site?
we have a special material type, so we have been tracking that. So I have in the staff report, for instance, that in 2011, 29.44 tons of tansy were received. And so for Hambro WSG, that's essentially about $2,600 worth of service that they weren't compensated.
And how much of that was the tsunami relief workers that pulled that? I mean, was that a spike in that particular year, or do we have a year of what the normal, excluding the tsunami workers? I know they pulled a bunch of tansy when we were training the tsunami workers.
the report I have from our records, it's about 8,300 pounds from the rural human tansy relief pullers.
On an average basis, about 8,300.
Yeah, last year.
So that's about 4 pounds. I mean,
4
tons.
tons.
4 tons of that 29.44 tons.
Okay. I'm uncomfortable with this.
Was pulled by
The tsunami relief guys.
Well, hopefully it would have been pulled by somebody if it wasn't pulled by them.
And that was on roadsides only.
Yeah.
So the other ones that were on the fields, basically we had them mow it. But on the roadside, we can't very well mow it there, so they pulled it, and basically Brett and I took it to the dump. And then we have another ton and a half approximately that we pulled and took to the dump.
Any other questions for Mr. Buckles from?
Mr. Buckles, it sounds like you're, like I say, concentrating on tansy, but we have a number of weeds mentioned here. Do we have any idea of the volume of those other weeds?
No, is the short answer. We don't track those other weeds separately. But the issue here is really about revenue, which is we're happy to process the tansy and other invasive weeds as disposal. The problem is that there's no source of revenue to process those materials. That's the challenge. And I don't think the ag department in our conversations is not forthcoming with suggestions that they knew of a pocket of money to cover these expenses.
Oh, I wish.
Why do they wait? Why do they wait until it's in bloom?
Well, that's the best time to pull it, really, because if you pull it, well, if you mow it before then you get a whole bunch of tansy little short plants that bloom. If If you pull it or mow it when it's in bloom, then you can, there's a much better control for controlling it.
But then that's when you have seeds.
No, after. You have a few weeks period. After that is when the seeds come.
Oh, okay.
In fact,
Okay.
one of the ways to, Fish and Game had 80 acres solid tansy, and they mowed it for 3 years in a row at bloom, and basically got rid of it. You know, they had to pull some along the fence line. So
I didn't understand. I thought that the
That's good,
seeds.
that's good information to know. Any other questions from Mr. Buckles? Thanks, Jim. I appreciate the information.
I do have a comment, though, because, well, it's not, it's just in general. We know Hambros needs the funds, and we don't have the funds. So it's hard to balance which is going to be better, you know, to try and go into the hole for the property owners who are responsible for their own properties and their own animals with the balancing of government agencies and private agencies. So it's a hard balancing act.
Okay, public comment? Mr. Miles?
I have a deep concern about increasing the tipping fees for the disposal of invasive weeds. First thing, I don't believe Kevin and Ted have created a true list of the invasive weeds that persist in Del Norte County. I'm aware that not too long ago, Humboldt County regionally published a list along with the state forest people, the national parks people, that listed all the invasive weeds. And I believe that your actions, if you increase this, will harm a number of small business people. These are the people that are our professional landscapers, our fly-by-night gardeners, as I like to call them. I believe it also would harm both the county and the city, in that occasionally that they have cleanup days in their parks, in the county-owned parks and the city-owned parks, where they clear different types of invasive weeds. I'm aware that the city may need to go back in a few months and clean up the Deal property again. Because guess what's growing there? Our famous tansy weed. Then there's the blackberries that the city may need to clean up on 101. You know Himalaya blackberries are an invasive species on the coast? Problem I see is that Kevin and Ted years ago didn't negotiate with Ambrose. I can understand Ambrose's problem. They don't want to shred this stuff and put it in dirty fines, and nobody's doing real composting, because in the composting process, some of these species, the heat of the compost would kill the seeds. It's not true with tansy, but if we would start doing real composting at the transfer station, some of this problem cost could be eliminated. My suggestion is that it's like the bench grass that a certain group of people pull out at the Lake Earl area. I'd like to know how, are they going to pay for the disposal of that? Huh?
They burn.
Well, we have some,
Could we not have a back and forth?
you want me to sit down?
I want you to finish your comment, Richard.
Well, I think we need to look into this, because if Martha knows that the beach grass is being burned, why can't we burn it at the transfer station in the undeveloped area once we clear it? Because we could get a yearly permit to burn.
Thank you, Richard. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing no other public comment, we'll bring it back.
I mean, it is the problem, because we used to be able, at the transfer station, they were able to burn stuff, and now they can't, right?
At the landfill.
At the landfill. And we can't burn it. And wasn't there even a point where Hambros could put it into their,
Incinerator.
yeah, and it was burned there, and now we can't. So we've been backed out of that corner, so it's not a question of, but that was my question of why they couldn't sit on the ground, dry out, and then be burned. But now I understand that if they sit on the ground and dry out, they produce seeds, and that's the reason.
They can, not all of them, but they can once they're in bloom.
Right.
Before bloom, then that, of course, that's not an issue.
I have a question about the numbers that we have in front of us. We have 29.44 tons of tansy were received, representing $2,600 of service. Is the service that it represents, that's at what rate? Is that at the brush rate, or is that at
That's
the
at the
rate?
garbage rate.
At the garbage rate?
If Hambro was being paid for disposal on that, that's the revenue that they would receive for the handling. At the landfill disposal price.
So this is a change.
If the situation right now is we're taking it for free, but that's a county policy. But the Hambro contract doesn't require that they not get paid for it.
But
So
they have.
They have not been paid for it.
But they have been taking it.
They have been taking it, and so that's why we're addressing this. So if we were focusing only on tansy and you wanted us to still make that free to the customers, then we would take a loss of revenue. We would have to find a way to absorb that $2,600 cost, which may be not a huge impact on us.
So Hambros, even after their CPI increase, is not willing to take the tansy. Is this the issue?
Well, it's
Or
not.
any of the noxious weeds? Is that the issue?
It's not a requirement of their contract at this point to take this material for no compensation.
Okay. But they are making issue with it.
I guess I would have to let Joel speak to that.
Joel, the issue that we really had, the monetary factor isn't as great as the actual contamination of the compost. So for us, before, Martha was absolutely right, when we could burn it, that stuff would get segregated and get burned, and now we can't do that any longer. So now if we take that in and we mix it with the compost, and Richard's correct at the right temperature, and we do get to the correct temperatures for composting, it does kill some of the seeds, but it just doesn't make any sense to take invasive weeds and put into compost. So we just need to figure out what else to do with it. And Kevin is conveying it correctly. It was never in our contract. And as the new manager, I'm just going through the contract, looking to see where there's holes and trying to plug those holes so that Hambro can make sure we're getting paid for all the services that we're providing. But really, it's about the seeds and the compost.
So Joel, do we have some tonnage from previous years? Because I know that 2011 was a spike at tansy because of the tsunami relief workers. Do we have, I mean, I hate to use this as a baseline if in fact it's, you know, eight tons.
Unfortunately, I'd have to refer to Ted on those
Sure,
numbers for
okay.
tansy. It just wasn't a concern to us in prior years.
I'm not sure if you heard, Mike, but what I heard Jim say was out of the 29 that we measured coming in,
Yeah.
4 of that was from the relief workers. So if you want to
Okay, so
subtract
good,
that 4 off, you're still talking
2,500.
25 tons.
Okay.
And that's probably fairly reasonable ballpark. So first issue would be the invasive weeds we want to keep out of the brush pile because they are trying to find a way to compost more of our product that's coming in. They're working on that actively. So we want to give them a good feedstock. So the invasives that are listed here, to the extent that they're identified, go into are currently being charged, but the difference is they would be charged at the disposal rate because it goes off to the landfill. If the second issue would be the tansy, and if the board wants to try to ride out another year of taking tansy for free from customers, we could get another year of data under our belts, and that would mean we would basically be compensating them for the tonnage without having a revenue coming in. So the cost to us, based on last year, would be about a little more than $2,000.
Okay. Any other questions? Board members? What do you do with the material now?
It is shredded.
The shredding wouldn't help prevent contamination. So I know if you shred the tansy, you're not going to spread the seeds, as long as it's not in seed when it comes in.
Jim,
you got to come to the mic.
Please come up.
I'm sorry. I was
That's all right.
just wondering, if you shred the tansy before it's in the seed form, then you don't have to worry about the spread of seeds. Now, of course, if you get it late in the season and it's already in the seed form, then that might be an issue, and I don't know how to deal with that part of it. But if it's in flower, if you shred it, there shouldn't be any issue with weed seed because it's shredded and it won't produce seeds at that point.
So to respond to that, I would say that the issue really for us is it comes in, gets loaded in the truck, gets dumped. There's no segregating, there's no, pulling out what is bloomed, what hasn't bloomed, before it's shredded. It's just all up in the pile and it's put in there. So that's the problem.
Okay. Any other public comment? Board members? What's your pleasure?
I'm not comfortable with raising another fee. And plus, I'm just now getting feedback from constituents now that they were surprised to see this on the agenda. So there's been no community outreach about this is a possibility of something going to be increased on top of it. So I'm not comfortable with it.
Okay.
But I thought the issue was that we were trying to be balanced, and we still have some issues with going over a few of our revenues expended for the year to date. And so I don't know if we can afford to take a hit. I think, I really do believe it's the property owner's responsibility. If we were in better shape, it wouldn't be an issue. But Hambro's not in very good shape, and neither is solid waste, neither is the county, neither is the city. So to continue to provide services for free makes it kind of counterproductive to move forward with being a financially viable institution, whatever institution that is.
I would be willing to try to take that year window and possibly ask the Ag Department to take a long, hard look at what is the window of time that we could safely collect tansy without seed. So a rancher could say, is it from, I'm just going to pick a day, is it from February to May 15th, that if any tansies collected at that point, Hambro's could be comfortable to know that it could be shredded without seed. Anytime after that point would possibly be a charge time. But to actually take a year and do an analysis of that tansy and see if we can get ahead of those seeds.
All I can say to that, it depends on the year. Every year it'd have to be a different date because
I
some
know,
years
but we
it's-
can get possibly a
pretty
window.
close.
We could get a window where we would be then working with the ranching community saying, okay, you know, don't wait until it's blooming and there are seeds flying to eradicate. Let's try to have Del Norte eradicates tansy in February or whatever we do. We could
And we could do the best we can on that. We
and
could
try to
sure
educate the landowner as to why it's important to get it out right at either pre-bloom or prior to the bloom.
Yeah, I mean, we could do the best we can, although plants don't usually cooperate.
Well, but if we can
But we
educate,
can sure do what we can.
so I would be willing, but not with the other noxious weeds. I think we should charge we should charge the regular price as it comes through at the weight station and see if we can assist in controlling the tansy.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of tack onto that. I was thinking the same thing. It's kind of a slippery slope when we say it's okay with one weed, but the other people come forward with more concerns with other weeds, and pretty soon we're left holding the bill for a whole lot that we don't have money to pay for. So I agree. It'd be nice to have a little bit of time to work this through.
If I may comment on or respond to Mike's concern about a lack of outreach, generally we don't start public outreach until after the board has given us directions, so we'll work with whatever you give us today, Mike.
Okay. So, what's your pleasure? Take any action? Speak now.
I would move that we do a 12-month hiatus on the tansy with a goal of identifying a workable plan with ag on disposal, and go ahead and have all of the other noxious weeds identified by the County Agricultural Commissioner Ken Smith as to go over the scales as at the full trash rate.
So, I'm sorry, when you say hiatus, you mean continue to take tansy for free? Okay,
For just the 12-month period.
gotcha.
I have a motion. And no second? So, I guess that means nothing changes. We will continue to accept the noxious materials as we have in the past.
Maybe we can, at this point, just direct staff to meet with ag commissioners and the community at large to see if there is a plan, as Martha suggested, so that we can come back with a little, the community knows in advance that they're going to potentially get hit with something, but then we can do a breakdown of what stuff we're going to just charge regular. I got a tough time with it, doing it right now.
Now, I really think that the proper thing the way to dispose of a noxious material like that is to burn it. So we need to find some way. I mean, if we've burned it before, and because Hambros isn't operating their incinerator or whatever anymore, then maybe we can look at some other way of burning it or getting it someplace that can burn. So I think we need to look for other alternatives rather than.
And that includes the Scotch broom and the pampas grass.
Because I just think that there needs to be a way for us to try to eradicate these noxious materials, these
Well,
weeds,
just
and
to be
not
clear,
put that on. You start putting that cost onto one property owner that can't afford it, and it's going to be in the neighbors
I
on all four
understand.
corners.
The only thing we've been taking for free is tansy, so if you take no action today, the other weeds will still be charged. Tansy will
Okay.
continue to be free.
Okay.
And in fairness to Hambro, we'll have to figure out a way to compensate them for their efforts. So if
Okay.
you don't take any action, that's what I intend to do.
And I would encourage the ag department to be involved with that too, because as Martha suggested, maybe there is a range of time that stuff can be gathered without
Well,
fear
ideally,
of the spread.
if the ranchers could burn it on their own property,
That
that
would be
would be
ideal.
ultimately the best thing, because there's actually a risk of spreading the seeds when you put it in a trailer and you drive it to the transfer station. If it's in the wrong state and it's flowering or seeding at that point, then the seeds are being spread across the county.
Well, that was another question that I had is if you're transporting this to Dry Creek and crossing the state border, there's no issue with that?
Well, it's mixed in with garbage, it's tarped, it's contained, it's pretty safe at that point.
Okay. Rick, you-
Kevin, I know you're always looking
And
for...
Oregon doesn't have a bug station, only
It's-
only California. They don't check you going out, they only check you coming in.
Kevin, I know you're always looking for grant opportunities. I believe there were Tansy grants in the past, haven't there been? It seems like there were...
Noxious weed pull and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
there were some grants, and I don't know how they worked or if they're still available, but...
Never heard.
Okay.
I'll look.
If you wouldn't mind, just do a cursory look at least, and
Sure
because
thing.
it just seems like this is something that may be bigger than just Del Norte County.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay. Moving on. We're going to take a look at discussion possible action regarding approval of the final budget. So I am going to, we're going to hold a public hearing. I'm going to open that public hearing at this time. Kevin? You want to give us a little rundown on the...
Oh, yeah, we spent a good amount of time the last several meetings, so I'm sure you're all familiar with the details of this budget. I presented it to the city and the county, and there were no questions or comments coming from the county, and some comments from Donna Westfall at the city, but no suggested changes to the budget, so we're recommending and requesting that you approve this budget, so we have a budget for the next fiscal year.
Great. Public comment? Mary?
Another question over, and this relates to the last year's independent auditors report for the end of the year. They had a schedule of significant deficiencies, and I couldn't tell by looking at this final budget if those items were addressed. One item that they had on page 20 was the, it said restricted net assets, that the last 2 years it hadn't been corrected. There was $150,000 that was required by the facility lease that needed to get paid back to the county. That was in the final auditor's report from last year, so I didn't know.
I did respond to your second email also.
Probably got it so fast before I got out the door, I didn't get it.
I sent it as soon as I could.
Oh, thanks.
That was about 2:30.
Has it been taken care of?
You're making public comments, and I answered to the board.
Okay, so I don't know what the answer is to that one. The second question was in regards to the second schedule of significant deficiencies, and it was the retiree benefits payments on page 21. And it noted that the county had been paying medical benefits for a retired authority employee, and I didn't know if that item had been corrected. And then the third item that I was concerned of was the deficit net assets, which is also on page 21. And it basically was asking if there was adequate reserves to settle the accrued liabilities. So those were the three questions that in looking back at last year's audit, that I wasn't unable to tell by looking at this year's budget if those were all taken into account. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Mr. Miles?
I have a concern. In today's newspaper, the county is advertising a position with the Solid Waste Authority. And that position is for another gate person. In these tight times, and we all know that Kevin's budget, we're not receiving the revenues like we did in the past over the scales, and currently he is manning the scales. What is the justification in this year's budget for this new person?
Thank you, Richard. Any other public comment? Seeing no other public comment, then we're going to bring it back.
I have some
Richard?
comments.
Yes.
That last question about the advertising in the paper, is that a replacement?
Yes.
Well, that answers that. It's not a new person. I'd like an answer to the three-question our chairman of our task force has, because I have those same questions. Could you answer those?
Sure. The question about the retiree benefits, I don't have an answer for that yet. And I don't know, Clint's here, I don't know if he has an answer for it either. But we have one retiree, and she had about $8,000 in insurance costs, which is part of our other post-employment benefit category. It's something that accrues as an expense for us. But we haven't been able to figure out how that is being paid, but whether that's being paid as part of the pass-through cost or is included in the employee benefit total that we pay to the county every year, which last year was $59,000, this year is about $59,000. I'm not sure if it's included in that or if it's separate from that. It's a fairly small amount, but it's an important question. The second two issues were related to establishing reserve, and my answer to Mary that I did respond, and you got a copy of it as well, Jerry, because she sent the original to you, is at the end of this year, we look at how much net income we have, and I will continue to recommend that the board look at trying to set money aside for reserve, not only for depreciation, but for the required reserve for the iBank. So we've got some money sitting aside in case for some reason that we can't make a payment to the county's holding the money to make the payment on the debt. But we have to get to the end of this year and then see how much we have.
Right.
Is that okay, Rich? Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to close the public hearing, and hopefully we can get a motion.
I'll move to approve the budget.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other comments from board members?
You know, I did have a question because it was put out a couple meetings ago of if expenses to continue to go up or we have that situation where the tipping, have we developed some alternatives as, for example, looking at, you know, instead of 7 days a week on the transfer side or shortening the hours on the non-big volume days, if there is a day that is slow, something that is a plan B for the authority is if finances don't seem to be working out, because that was something pointed out, almost a financial austerity type situation, that if things get worse, what's going to be done?
At the last meeting, I ran through a bullet list of 5 or 6 or 8 various things that could be looked at in more detail to either save expenses or increase revenue. And if you want, we can bring those back to the next meeting and start going through those. You can help prioritize what your preferences would be as far as options. I agree with you. Good to have a backup plan.
Yeah, because I know when we checked with other counties, they did have, for example, Tuesday was a day they shut down, or they did half day, they did every other Saturday, or
Yeah.
not to say that's what you'd want to do here locally, but the possibilities if the costs can't be contained, or if we don't have the same amount of stuff going across the scales, then what's going to be done to bring in so it's manageable.
Right, the landfill, Dry Creek landfill, about 2 years ago, closed on Sunday. That's not an abnormal thing, but it is a reduction of services to our constituents. So that should be considered as well, right?
Great, good question. Anything else? Good? Okay, I have a motion and a second. Rose, would you poll the vote, please?
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Murray?
Yes.
Commissioner Ania?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Chair Hamilton?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good for another year.
We're open for another year. Good.
Okay, we've got some... Okay, we're going to take just a couple of minutes. The next item that's going to be coming up is discussion on the amendments to the joint powers agreement. So we'll be looking at that in just a couple of minutes as soon as Supervisor McClure gets back. So we need to take a little
Stay
break.
tuned for this commercial announcement.
Okay, we'll come back to order now. We're going to bring up item 7.2. There's some recommended changes to the JPA agreement with the city and the county. Any public comment? Mr. Miles?
Yes, Mr. Harrington, I have a lot of comments about the force code. I believe it's time that a proposal by Mike Sullivan be written into this thing. You people are public servants. You are elected by your constituency, and you serve on the authority. You are both paid by the county and the city a stipends for being elected officials. But you collect a stipends for serving on this board.
No, we do not.
Those are
So you can pass
You
over
get
that.
away with that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you were on vacation, I think.
I think I was on vacation. Then,
We'll do it.
Unanimous.
We'll do it.
Yeah.
will you do it?
Done.
Done.
It's
Done?
Yeah, it's
As
done.
you said.
Then, it still upsets me that when you formed this super committee, you eliminated the public person. If you change back after the first of the year, I'd like you to put a public person back on this board. Because you have your elected views, but in the past you had a citizen sitting on this.
Richard, I'm not going to take this time off of your comment period. You're more than welcome to use up your 3 minutes. But have you read the...
Oh, yeah.
Have you read this?
Yeah, I've read
what the
it.
changes are? Well, you're going over every one that's in here so far.
Okay, and then there's another one that is infamous. And it goes back a long time with the city. And I currently blame the city for being short-sighted. Both C. Ray Smith, Mr. Hollingsworth, Mike Scavuzzo, all he said that there should be something in the city side of this body if the city wanted to withdraw. Because we're not getting paid and the finances of the city are getting to the point the city's not getting any franchises fees. The county's not getting any franchises fees. So here's a source of income that I believe, because of the financial status of both the county and the city, that if the city wants to pull out and earn the franchise fees, I think that a discussion about the franchise fees should be included in this.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Can I ask a question, Andy Larson from the county?
You can now. I don't know that I'll answer it, but you can ask.
Well, and I'm looking it over, making notes and the general drift of what is happening with the amendment to it. When are you going to actually vote on this amendment? Is it going to be soon? Are you going to have another public comment, or are you going to have another meeting?
Well, I think we're going to take action on this today.
Okay. Well, the way I read this, and tell me if I'm wrong, the purpose of this amended joint powers agreement, that the board that will exist, and going back to the two selected by the city council, two, and an added board member will not have the authority to make any ordinance, will not have the authority to make any law. Anything set in concrete that will affect the public will be taken back to the city council and taken to the board of supervisors.
If that's your question, that's correct.
So it's, huh?
If that's your question, then yes, that is correct.
Well, That's what I'm asking, if you're going to
Okay.
vote on it.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing no other public comment, then I'm going to bring it back to
Jerry?
this board. Yes, sir.
If I may, I just wanted to, first of all, I incorporated every comment that you had at the last one. Those are all highlighted.
Right.
Martha Rice has taken a look at this. She made some changes for clarity.
Great. Well, and I was going to ask the board if they had any additional, anything that they saw that they needed changed. So that was a question that I was going to ask, and I'd love to hear from Martha.
Well, I actually wanted to highlight the process to make sure that we're doing this in a way that's acceptable in the method of adopting ordinances. And Martha was helpful on this, so, and yes, she may have something to add to help clarify, but the suggestion is that if this board decides to introduce an ordinance, after that ordinance is introduced, we've already worked out the...
Well, this is an amendment. Is this what we're talking about?
This is an amendment, but
Okay.
I want to make sure that you're clear on what the amendment means in the way that we approach this.
Okay.
So once an ordinance is introduced, then at that point, before it's adopted, it would go to the city and the county for approval before it goes to the public hearing and final adoption. Because that seems like
Okay.
a
I see
practical
what you're-
approach to be
okay.
able to do this, rather than going
Right.
through the adoption
Right.
and
Exactly.
then getting...
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make
That
sense,
sounds-
Mike?
Okay.
I just want to make sure that...
Okay, I was going off like you were talking about what we were doing here to this amendment.
No,
And you
no,
were
no.
talking about the ordinance part
The-
of this. Okay.
Right, so the part related to the ordinance, that's
So
the intent.
to make sure, in case it didn't fly, if you'd already had the public hearing and then the county said yes
Right.
and the city said no or vice versa, you'd have to start the process all over
Right.
again. So yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly, so
Perfect.
after introduction, if the city or the county have comments, then we go back to, we only go one step back to square one.
Right.
To make the revisions, and then we go through the process again. Here's the changes, city and county, you okay?
Perfect.
Then we schedule the public hearing, and then we do adoption. So
Yep.
everybody's on board.
Anybody have a problem with that?
No?
Okay. Motion?
So one more clarification. Basically, you're giving approval to bring this to the city and the county, because the city and the county individually and separately have to approve this. So that's the process that we're talking about.
But it would have to go through here first.
Right. I do have a comment about that, because I don't understand, it seems like if we're talking about duplication of services and issues and review, that the people that are appointed by the city council and the board of supervisors should be qualified enough to make that approval for representing each entity. So I think it's,
Well, I think the issue ran into, and I'm sorry, go ahead.
that's right.
Okay, I think the issue ran into is on the most recent board, you had basically 3/5 of the county not represented by that board. The member at large was not an elected official. In fact, she wasn't even elected. I mean, she was appointed by the four that sat on it. So you had 3/5 of the county not represented in passing laws that affect the whole
Are
county.
you talking about the process to
I
amend the JPA?
understand that, but what I'm saying is, when you're sitting on the Solid Waste Management Authority Board, you're representing the solid waste for the whole county. I mean, it's not just the city or the county, it's both entities together. So I disagree with the fact that you guys feel like that a large portion of the county wasn't represented, because those board members should have been representing all of the county for the Board of Supervisors. So
Well, I think this will resolve that.
that's just my personal opinion.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other comments, Richard? You know, I would just like to address what Catherine's concerns are, and I don't see the issue. If it's good enough to go to the city or to the county, why not go through that one very small step that actually keeps this board, and Kevin can agree with me, would keep this board, whatever it ends up being, from getting flack from the rest of the community, when you have to just take a very small step and say, yeah, that's okay with us, yeah, that's okay with us, and then process it forward. So I don't think it's a process that's so cumbersome that we can't deal with. And I think it takes a lot of pressure off of this board when they pass an ordinance. So I think it's a win-win deal, and I don't,
Okay, well, we disagree. I think that's being a little idealistic. I think this board will still get flack.
well, I'm not saying that it's not going to get flack just from the proposal of whatever they come up with, but at least it will get vetted out through those other two entities, the city and the county, and then when it comes back to them, they can say, hey, look, we went through the city, we went through the county, we did the whole thing. So, personally, I think it can only do good. Yes, Martha.
I agree that I think that it will allow for a vetting process where there's not innuendo and rumor and that kind of stuff, because that has been, historically, there's always been kind of a stir happening. And I think this way, with the backup of the board and the backup of the city council, that stir is eliminated.
Yeah, I agree.
And in retrospect, I wish we would have had a more thorough outreach before adopting the responsibility ordinance, because I continue to think it's a good ordinance. It's certainly, we can look at it, but even at this time, we don't have full buy-in from the city and the county, and we really need to get to the point of having an ordinance that is going to hold people responsible in a way that both the city and the county agree. So next month, we're coming back here to talk about that, and it might still be worth on that ordinance to go back to the city and the county. But while we're all here, it's a good idea to review it.
Good. Okay, I have a motion and a second. Rose, would you poll the vote, please?
Commissioner Nia?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Murray?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Chair Hamilton?
Yes. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
That was a big step, I think. Okay, we are going to convene in closed session. You think we're going to have anything to report out?
Well, the one item that we talked about got pulled, and so all that's left is my evaluation. So if that's not completed, then we don't need to have a closed session.
Oh. Okay. Has everybody gotten the evaluation sheet? I talked to Jeremy the other day, she hadn't received any, so I don't know where they're going.
Mine went to the back burner.
Mine went.
They've been outsourced to China.
Did you? Well, she hasn't received it, so, okay.
Jerry, is that what you did? You outsourced my evaluation to China?
Yeah, I had to, because, well, to tell you the truth,
There's no items for
and a lot of it's my fault, is because I need you to send me another copy of the goals and objectives. I do have the evaluation sheet, but I don't have the goals and objectives and your report out from.
Okay.
If you
How about
would,
if I
I'm sorry,
prepare a
that's my
packet for all 10 board members, send it out again, and then I'll leave it to you to remind them to get it back into Jeremy, and she's prepared to compile them.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. And with that, since we are not going to evaluate Kevin, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Before 5 o'clock.